Normandy, summer of 1944. In interrogation records kept by American intelligence officers, the same account appears again and again from captured German riflemen. They believed every American soldier coming through the hedgerows carried a machine gun. None of them did. Each man carried a single rifle, built by one immigrant toolmaker most of them would never hear of, in a country that would never fully pay him for it. 9 months later, Congress had the chance to give that man $100,000 in gratitude. Congress said no. Patton had already put it in writing weeks earlier. The rifle those German riflemen were describing without knowing its name was the greatest battle implement ever devised. Its name was the M1 Garand. Its designer was John Cantius Garand, born in 1888 on a farm outside Saint-Remy, Quebec, one of 12 children. By January of 1945, more than 4 million of his rifles had armed nearly every American infantryman in Europe and the Pacific. He had signed the patent over to the United States government for free. This is Echoes of Valor X. Today we tell the true story of John Garand. Garand's mother passed away in 1899 when he was 11 years old. His father moved what remained of the family across the border to Jewett City, Connecticut, chasing work in the textile mills that were hiring anyone strong enough to stand at a machine 12 hours a day. John went to work in that mill as a boy, sweeping floors, and it was there, surrounded by English he barely understood, that he began teaching himself the language one overheard word at a time. He found the thing he was good at almost by accident. A shooting gallery needed someone to fix its air rifles, and Garand took the job. He was not a hunter, not a marksman, not a soldier's son. He was a boy who liked to understand how a mechanism worked, and a shooting gallery gave him hundreds of small broken machines to study every week. He left school without finishing it. He never attended engineering college. Everything he would later build, he taught himself at a workbench. In 1919, the United States Army hired him as a toolmaker at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, the government's own arms factory. He was 31 years old, an immigrant with no formal engineering degree, walking into a building run by career military officers. Nobody there expected him to spend the next 15 years proving all of them wrong. The problem Garand set out to solve was one the entire American military establishment believed could not be solved, not affordably, not reliably, not in time to matter. Every major army on Earth carried a bolt-action rifle. After each shot, a soldier had to take his hand off the trigger, lift the bolt, pull it back, push it forward, and lock it down before he could fire again. The design had barely changed since the First World War, and the officers who ran ordnance saw no reason to change it now. A self-loading rifle, the thinking went, would waste ammunition. Soldiers would spray bullets instead of aiming them, emptying supply lines a nation at war could not afford to empty. The mechanisms would be too delicate for mud, too complicated to repair in the field, too expensive to build by the million. Better, the Army's own experts argued, to trust the simple bolt and the well-drilled marksman. Garand disagreed. And he had no rank, no war record, and no political standing to make that disagreement matter. What he had was a workbench at Springfield Armory and permission to keep tinkering as long as his superiors allowed it. Year after year, prototype after prototype, he worked on a design that used the gas from a fired cartridge to cycle the weapon automatically, chambering a new round without the soldier's hand ever leaving the trigger. Ordnance boards rejected early versions and changed the specifications on him more than once, forcing him to rebuild entire sections of the design. 15 years passed between the day he arrived at Springfield and the day the Army finally adopted his rifle, in January of 1936. 15 years is a long time to be told no by the only employer who could ever say yes. Here's where it gets strange. Garand's genius was not only in making the rifle fire faster, it was in making it possible to build that same complicated self-loading mechanism to exact tolerances using ordinary factory workers who had never touched a firearm before the war. He designed the M1 the way a toolmaker designs a tool, not for the gunsmith's bench, but for the assembly line. Every part had to be simple and consistent enough that a 19-year-old riveter in Massachusetts could produce it correctly 10,000 times in a row. That decision, more than any single mechanical feature, is what turned the M1 Garand into a war-winning weapon. Springfield Armory and the Winchester Repeating Arms Company built more than 4 million of them during the war, enough to arm nearly every American rifleman and replace the ones lost in combat as fast as they were lost. No other nation fighting the war managed to put a self-loading rifle into the hands of its entire infantry. Germany tried, eventually fielding its own self-loading rifles, and late in the war, the Sturmgewehr 44. But German industry, squeezed by Allied bombing and years behind in tooling, could never build them in the numbers Springfield and Winchester turned out. In the hedgerows of Normandy, that is exactly what happened. Ordinary American soldiers, farm boys and factory hands with no more training than any other army's infantry, each carried a rifle that could fire roughly 3 times faster than the bolt-action Karabiner 98K the German army trusted. Soldiers on both sides felt the difference immediately. That is the same account we opened with, German riflemen convinced they were facing machine guns. Now you know whose name was never in their intelligence reports. A toolmaker from a Quebec farm, still drawing his ordinary paycheck in Springfield while his rifle did the fighting for him. That January letter was addressed to Major General Levin Campbell, the Army's Chief of Ordnance, and dated the 26th. It was about as close to a medal as an infantry rifle could receive, and it was aimed at the wrong man. Patton was praising ordnance as an institution. The soldier who had actually designed the weapon was still working at his bench in Springfield for a government salary, exactly as he had for the previous 26 years. After the war, someone in Washington finally looked at the arithmetic. Garand's invention had been handed to the United States for nothing, and his rifle had helped arm the force that won 2 theaters of a world war. A bill was introduced in Congress, House Resolution 5276, to award him $100,000 as a token of the nation's gratitude, a fraction of what a private patent holder would have earned in royalties on 4 million rifles. The bill did not pass. Garand did not campaign for it. He did not go to the newspapers. He kept working at Springfield Armory, refining rifle designs that would never share the fame of the M1 until he retired on an ordinary civil servant's pension. In 1973, the Army inducted him into its Ordnance Corps Hall of Fame, a plaque and a ceremony, the closest thing to formal recognition he would ever receive. He passed away the following year, in 1974, in Springfield, the city where he had spent more than half his life building the rifle that carried his name into a war he never saw. John Garand is buried in Hillcrest Park Cemetery in Springfield, not far from the Armory, where he spent 55 years of his life. No monument marks him as the man who changed infantry warfare. Most of the millions of soldiers who carried his rifle into Normandy, the Hurtgen Forest, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa never learned his name, and neither did most of the Americans who benefited from what those soldiers accomplished. The country he armed asked nothing of him in return, and in the end gave him almost nothing back. He never called that unfair. He simply kept working. That is not only the story of a man overlooked, it is the story of what America has always quietly asked of its most useful people. Build the thing that saves everyone else, and do not expect to be thanked for it. America still stands because of men like this. Subscribe so these men are never forgotten.